Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching Make Me Smart. I will tell you, the whole video of this thing has gotten way more interesting since we all started working from home. I'm just saying, watch a Friday, you'll know what I mean. Hit that subscribe button and you won't miss an episode.
There we go.
That's so funny. It sounds
Hey, everyone. I'm Molly Wood.
And I'm Kyle Risdall, even though it sounded different. Welcome back to Make Me Smart. This is the weekly show, the Tuesday show, the big show, deep dive into one issue at a time. We'll also do listener comments because that's the way we roll around here. We are doing the workers who are doing actual out in the economy work so that the rest of us can stay home and stay safe. We want to talk about the risks they face, how they're doing in this pandemic, and what protections might be there for them as they go about their jobs.
Yep. When we look at the workers who have been deemed essential in the time of the lockdown, so far we find that more than 10,000 healthcare workers have tested positive for the virus. Dozens of transit and grocery store workers have died. There are protests at places like Amazon or Instacart. They're worried about the lack of protections for them when they have to go to work. So today on the show, we're going to talk about just how vulnerable workers are to the COVID-19 virus, and then, of course, what might be done to help them.
So what we're going to do is we're going to get, as we like to do, an expert to make us all really smart on this. His name is Dr. David Michaels. He's the head of OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration in the Obama administration. He's now an epidemiologist teaching at George Washington University, the School of Public Health there. Dr. Michaels, thanks for coming on.
Well, Kai, it's great to be on your show.
So let me ask you, just to start things off here, as a baseline going into this crisis, give us the sort of the state of play of worker protections in this economy. And I get that that's a broad question, but sort of set the expectation for us.
Well, in general, we have 130 million workers. Probably somewhere between 3 and 5 million get injured every year on the job. We don't really know how many get sick, and that's before COVID hit. The agency responsible for making sure employers provide a safe workplace, because the law says it's up to employers to make sure every workplace is free of recognized serious hazards. That's OSHA, the operation I ran under President Obama. And it's a small agency. We've got 2,000 inspectors to cover 7 or 8 million workplaces. It would take about 165 years to visit every workplace once. That's before we got to this crisis.
Wow. What are there regulations, existing regulations, that would, because right now it sort of seems like protection for these workers is really company by company, plant by plant. Like, are there regulations already in place that would or should be protecting people in grocery stores or delivery services or hospitals or even prisons?
Molly, that is the great question. OSHA has some regulations that generically sort of cover it, a regulation around using the right personal protective equipment, PPE, or hand washing. But there isn't a specific regulation on exposure to airborne infectious diseases. We actually had one on bloodborne pathogens that came out during the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and we are working on one on airborne after the H1N1 epidemic, but that wasn't finished. So there is nothing issued by OSHA that says to employers, this is what you must do to protect workers exposed to COVID-19. Nothing specific to airborne.
So reading between the lines here, to follow on Molly's question, it sort of is, the workers are depending on the companies to take the precautions necessary. And I'm thinking, for grocery workers, like masks and face shields, and, in my grocery store, there's a plastic partition between cashier and customer, those kinds of things. That's up to the company to put into place.
Unfortunately, it is. I mean, there is no requirement. A lot of companies are doing it. A lot of them aren't. That's what's very clear.
Yeah.
Wow. So we've seen some members of Congress, Elizabeth Warren and California Representative Ro Khanna, unveiled this Essential Workers Bill of Rights, which is, sort of unlikely to go anywhere in Congress right now. Is there anything that OSHA and the federal government could do in the interim? Are there emergency provisions that could be put into place?
Absolutely. The OSHA law has a clause that said, in an emergency, OSHA can issue an emergency temporary standard. And actually, I've been advocating this for now more than 3 months, saying, in the face of this epidemic, OSHA could easily just put out a statement, a requirement saying, all employers must follow OSHA regulations and CDC guidelines, and any new guidelines that come out. Of course, guidelines are changing all the time, so it can't be too specific. OSHA could do that. We actually left one in place when we left, but the decision has been made right now, at least, not to put that out. So it's all based on recommendations.
The decision has been made?
Well, I've talked to a lot of folks within OSHA.
Sorry.
You know, OSHA is filled with incredibly dedicated, smart people, and they're ready to go. But I think the White House has decided that this is not an issue that needs more regulation. No, I think that's a mistake, of course, because I think not only for the current workers, I mean, you talked about the grocery store workers, the meat packing workers, where there are hundreds and hundreds in several plants who have gotten infected, farm workers. But if we're going to reopen the economy, workers have to make sure it's safe to go back. They're terrified right now. Workers who are essential workers have to be there, and sometimes they're offered a little bit more money. But right now, as you said, in these packing houses, people are elbow to elbow. They're in there very close, and it's just not safe. We can't expect people to go back to other factories and other places where they could be exposed.
Yeah. So can we talk about workers' rights for a second? Because, if I'm a worker, well, it's too late now for the Smithfield workers in that plant in Sioux Falls, right? But if I'm, let's say, a nurse, right, or as happened here in Los Angeles, right, who was not given proper protective equipment or sufficient protective equipment, do I have the right to refuse a shift? What can I do?
Not really. I mean, it's very tough. There are very few individual rights of action under federal law. The employer is supposed to protect you, and you should be protected from at least complaining, from raising your voice. But you have to be facing very, very significant hazards to be able to refuse work and then to expect the government to protect you. Sadly, I would never recommend workers do that individually. If you do it collectively, then you have some rights under the National Labor Relations Act, which says collective action is protected. But right now, most workers who are in these very difficult situations don't really have many rights. It's unfortunate. That's the obligation is on the employer, and while some employers are doing their best and they're trying to get the right equipment and make sure people are protected, we know that's not the case. And there was a nursing home in Riverside, California, where all of the workers there just didn't show up one day. They're scared.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, is part of the inaction because nobody's sort of aggregating the downstream impact of, for example, we saw in Sioux Falls that once workers got sick and they had to close plants, grocery store shelves don't get stocked. If emergency responders, as is happening in New York to a lot of first responders whose lungs are already compromised by responding to 9/11, are starting to become infected with the virus and get very ill and can't go to work and protect the streets. So how is there a way to draw that clear line between the continued functioning of society and the protection of essential workers?
There is, but we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't wait till, to count the bodies before we actually put the precautions into place, because we know how to do it. We know how to work safely. It's going to mean, though, in a lot of these plants, production will slow down rather than speed up, because you're going to have people spaced differently. You're going to have to give them time to wash their hands. You're going to have to give them maybe different types of gloves. It's going to have an effect on the economy, but it's nothing compared to the effect of the economy that we've had so far. And this would mean we'd save some lives.
All right, so let's think way downstream effects, right? Just because I saw a piece in the wherever it was, it went by me on Twitter this morning about lung damage seems to be more significant even in mildly affected patients than had previously been assumed. What recourse do these workers have if in 20 years they are 47 years old and have serious lung problems that they got on the job 25 years ago during the pandemic?
Yeah, and that raises the workers' compensation system, which is probably the most ineffective component of the social safety net. Every state has a program. There is no federal oversight, and there's been a race to the bottom. Theoretically, if you're injured or made sick on the job, you can apply for workers' comp, and it's supposed to pay 100% of your medical costs and a good portion of your lost wages. but you got to prove it happened at work. And it's going to be quite an interesting fight. Yeah. Now, some states, Illinois, Kentucky, have already said, if you're a grocery store worker, for example, and you develop COVID-19, that's compensable. That we're presuming that it's work-related, but that's going to be different from state to state.
Let's come back to the now. What would proper regulation...
Because it's so pleasant here in the now.
Molly would like to solution. I would like to solution for a moment, as I am wont to do on this show. Yeah. What would proper regulation look like? I mean, if you could return to your agency, just teleport right into that office and get some things moving, what would be your prescription?
I'd say every employer has to take a very hard look at the guidance that OSHA is putting out now, which is just recommendations, and the CDC recommendations, and develop a plan and say, here's the program. This is what we're going to do to make sure workers are protected. It's going to be different in every workplace. You know, some supermarkets have lots of space and they can space people out pretty easily to work. Others are very small and you may have to limit the number of people coming in. You may have to put up plexiglass. But every workplace has to say, how am I reaching the results that the CDC and OSHA want me to reach, and to involve workers in that discussion and make it very clear, this is how we're going to do it together to make sure everybody's safe. And you can do that. That's what the standard should look like. Not a specific thing, say everybody gets a plexiglass partition, but every employer steps up to the plate and says, how are we going to make sure everybody is safe?
We've seen states, obviously, step in to fill a lot of voids. Do states have a role here? Can they require employers to do anything specific?
Well, they do. The way the OSHA law works is 21 states have their own OSHA program, and some states are doing a great job. I mean, Washington State has essentially put all those recommendations from CDC into requirements, and Washington State employers are just supposed to follow them. The funny thing is, when President Trump issued the Reopening America guidelines, it actually gave all responsibility for worker protection to the states. And the majority of states have absolutely no capability and no regulations, no workforce to do anything about that. So it differs from state to state. But in general, the requirement to make sure employers provide safe workplaces has been a federal function for 50 years.
That did not help. I am not more
yeah.
cheerful.
No. Workers
that does
are
not
always
feel like a solution.
Workers are always in the back seat. I mean, whenever we talk about public health, we talk about economics, all these things. Protecting workers rarely gets to the front of the line. And right now, with the threats coming to the food supply, you realize how important workers are. And these are, low-paid immigrant workers who are keeping the country going, and we're recognizing their importance. And we need to now recognize, for the future, how they need to be safe.
Yep. Dr. David Michaels, thank you so much for coming on, for the insights, and hopefully for some suggestions for anyone who might be listening.
Yeah. Well, thanks to you.
Dr. Michaels, thanks a lot.
Thanks again.
Really appreciate it.
Take good care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
That last line there, that whole, it always comes down, workers are always at the end of the line, right?
I mean, it's absolutely true. Even at the beginning of this, you saw people saying, so now we're essential, but you didn't think that our minimum wage should be raised.
Right.
Just that simple.
Right.
Yeah. And now we're in a position where for a lot of people who are being laid off, like we should really, we're trying to draw a bunch of bright lines here, but one of them is for a lot of people who have been laid off, this is the work. This is the employment that is going to be available in this country for the foreseeable future. And if every person who has to take one of these jobs is immediately at risk and in danger, our economy does not keep moving, let alone the human cost, which is already incredibly high. Yeah.
So if you are a person who has one of these jobs, if you're, in a grocery store or transportation, or if you're a healthcare worker or anybody else who's out there working so the rest of us can stay safe, send us an email, send us a voice memo. Let us know, first of all, how you're doing, but also what protections are there for you and whether or not you feel like they're enough. It's makemesmart@marketplace.org, and we'll be back in a sec.
Yep.
All right, we're back. We got some
We're
news
back.
that we want to talk about. We're back. We're back.
We're having we're having a little bit of a Monday of a Tuesday on this show. I think that was
that's a good line. Monday and Tuesday. All right. So look, just looking
okay.
at the URL here for your link in the rundown. Yours flows naturally from Dr. Michaels. So hit it.
It is related, and I will confess that I went and got it while we were talking because I had seen this story going by yesterday and was all upset about it, and then sort of forgot because 3 days happened since yesterday. Yesterday, it was reported that Whole Foods, and it's so funny because I saw this headline go by, and I was like, "Oh, Amazon is using a heat map to track," and I thought something useful, such as rate of infection. Nope. Amazon is reportedly using a heat map to track Whole Foods stores that are at risk of unionization. Now, Amazon, as we know, has resisted efforts to increase protections for its workers in warehouses. It's had a number of employees quit. It's had some walkouts. It has fired almost every individual to, exactly, to Dr. Merkel's point about individuals being fired, but collective action potentially being more effective, which is what reminded me immediately of the story. The heat map focuses on monitoring 3 main areas: external risks, store risks, and team member sentiment. So it looks at, for example, local union membership size, let's say, like the distance between a Whole Food store and the closest union, a labor incident tracker, the percentage of families within the store zip code that fall below the poverty line and the local unemployment rate, and so on and so forth. It considers, it looks at store risks. I mean, I don't know why. Well, I mean, I want to get Dr. Michaels back because union busting seems to really be in this sort of like gray area. Like it has to be very, very specific and very specific activity, presumably like making maps of information about things around your stores.
It's just data gathering and situational awareness. All right, so here's the deal. We're not going to get Dr. Michaels back, but also I think this is like a labor lawyer thing, not an epidemiologist thing, right?
Yeah.
So look, if you're a labor lawyer, write to us. Tell us if they can do this because, none of us is as smart as all of us.
Because the question of Amazon and unionization is an old story. I mean, it's been
for sure.
Throughout its history, there have been efforts to unionize that it's put down firmly. Tesla is in a similar position where it's making people come to work, or was for quite a while throughout this, making people come to work. Spectrum still has people coming to work, and cases are starting to rise. I mean, this is one of those scenarios where it seems like really obvious that doing the right thing actually is good for your business in the case of something like Amazon. But presumably, as we've talked about on the show before, they must think there's an endless supply of people who are willing to come in at $17 an hour and replace the people who get sick. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the record, we talked about that on one of our daily shows. So if you don't listen to the daily, listen to us every day, Monday through Friday.
You totally should.
Monday through Friday.
It's only like 10 minutes.
Totally should. I know.
Yeah,
right?
you can do it while you're doing the dishes from that meal you had to cook
we
again.
take your questions. That's right. Wednesdays we take your questions. Fridays we drink beer. It's a good time. It's quick and dirty.
It's a good time.
Okay, so
it's right here in the same feed.
Yes, it is.
Sorry.
So you should be listening anyway, right? I mean, come on.
It's easy.
What we need to do is we need to expand the pool, right? We don't need people who listen already to listen more, although we do. We just need more people to listen. Anyway, so I want to go to oil for a minute, and I want to go to oil from yesterday. We're recording this Tuesday morning. It's 10:35 LA time. Yesterday, Monday, the big oil story was the May futures contract closing negative, right? You had to pay somebody $37 to take a barrel of oil off your hands, which is bananas. And all the commentary yesterday was, oh, come on, it's just because the futures contract is expiring and nobody wants to be left holding the bag for actually having to take physical delivery, right? That's the way futures contracts work. You buy this contract, and when the contract expires, you have to take actual physical delivery of the oil that you have contracted for.
Right.
So that was the big story yesterday, and everybody was like, it'll be fine when June becomes the front month contract, which is today. So the May contract expires this afternoon. The June contract becomes the operative contract, and as we sit here, the June futures contract, which now has a month to toll here, the June futures contract is down 45% on the day to $11, right?
Whoa.
So now what's happening is the oil glut that we thought was just hitting a technicality in the oil markets yesterday is actually proving to be more structural. There's so much oil and so little demand that there's nowhere to put it. And so storage has become really expensive, and you're going to have to pretty soon pay people to take June oil off your hands, which is bananas. And
Wow.
even apart from the whole negative pricing thing, let's think about that, how this plays out, right? Oil is incredibly expensive to produce. It's really capital intensive. Oil companies are heavily leveraged. There are tens of thousands of jobs that have been lost already in the oil patch just in this country. This is a big deal, like structurally, not just, hey, look at this weird thing that's happening in the oil markets. It's actually real, and it's a result of this pandemic. And I just think that's kind of wild.
I'm glad I have you here. I'm going to take advantage of this moment of access because what I have been wondering is exactly that. Like oil is maybe less of a pillar than it used to be, but I, in my mind, at least put oil in the same category as like mortgages in terms of things that significantly impact the global economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, are we talking about one of the pillars? Is this like one of the four horsemen of the economic apocalypse?
So if oil companies start going under, it's not going to be the systemic financial shock that the mortgage meltdown was in 2008, right? That was a financial system crisis that caused the financial system to seize, and nobody was lending. That's not what's going to happen in oil. What's going to happen in oil is there will be bankruptcies, and more tens of thousands of people will lose their jobs. Because it's expensive and time-consuming to shut down an oil rig. There's a whole lot of things going on. So it's a different kind of crisis, but it is a crisis. Yeah, for sure.
Even as you're talking, it went from 45 to 46. So
I know. I was watching.
Negative
Great,
46%. Yeah.
That
is a mesmerizing and terrifying number. I did on a funnier note. My friend Tom Merritt had a really good tweet about it the other day, and he was like, yesterday he said, "I'm really regretting not adding oil storage barrels to my prepper list."
Oh, for sure, right? I mean, if you've got a swimming pool, if you've got a 100,000 gallon swimming pool, you can get a bunch of oil in there and just hang on to it.
Because it was what? It was like negative. What was it? Negative $37? Could you have made $37,000?
$37.63, right?
If you had a 100,000 gallon swimming pool, that's a stinky, gross swimming pool. Don't do that, anyone.
Yeah, don't do that. All right, enough oil. Anyway.
That's it. That is it for the news fix. Please don't forget to check out our daily explainers on your smart speaker. You can tell any Echo device to make me smart and have a listen. I am on there, I think, talking about not nurse shortages, but something good. It was something good that Erica Phillips wrote for us. That was not my best promo, but they're really interesting. And we do like 6 of them every week. So it's new content all the time. It's hard to keep track.
It is. Honestly, I was going to say, I thought I'm the one who did nurses.
Student loan debt.
Maybe not. I just read them, man. Erica writes them.
I did jigsaw puzzles. And 95 masks and student loan debt. Yeah. And also, I'm not one of those families. I'm sorry. Good for you, everyone. Not doing puzzles.
Yes, that's true.
All right.
So
time for you to talk. Yeah. Your turn.
We've made enough of us.
Hi, Kai and Molly.
This is
not you, Kai.
Detroit.
This is Rebecca from Baltimore.
It was great to hear comments on my question about GDPR.
I wanted to put in my vote.
I want to discuss a slightly different but maybe related thing.
All right, so the sentiment thus far, and we're on like week 5 or 6, has mostly been we're all in this together, right? That's what the vibe has sort of become, except the catch, of course, and if you go back to the top of the program and you listen to Dr. Michaels, we're not all in this together, right? Not only are there essential workers who are putting themselves at risk, but there are divisions along race and class and geography and how this is affecting people in this economy, in this society. Which gets us to our first comment. It's from Paige Portis. She is in Austin, Texas.
Hi, Kai and Molly. This is Paige from Austin, Texas. I've been speaking with my parents who live in Mississippi, and it's a stark contrast from what I'm experiencing here when it comes to the stay-at-home practices. I'm fortunate enough to live in an urban area with a plethora of delivery services. My parents, on the other hand, in Mississippi, have none of that. And while their area is still fairly well populated, none of the grocery stores offer delivery, and Uber Eats is still non-existent. Given the state's alcohol laws, a delivery service like Drizzly is certainly an even more far-off possibility. Both being over 60, it's no small feat for my parents to go out and get supplies. Amazon's been overloaded with its delivery times, and it's been a real challenge to help them stay safe, but also maintain their shelter in place. The whole experience has brought my attention to the disparity that exists between this urban-rural divide in America and how we're all experiencing this outbreak differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
That is
sure.
really true.
For sure. I was talking to a hog farmer in Polo, Illinois about a week ago, and he said, and we put this actually on the air marketplace because it's the way the guy feels, and I got a little roasting on Twitter for it, but he said, you know what, it's time to reopen things. Rural America is different than the cities, and we need to get going. We're farmers. We don't see people all that much anyway, and we need to have access to these businesses and services, and they're shut down. It's a totally different experience for sure.
And there's no question that it is much more of a serious issue when you don't have access, whether it's delivery or, I mean, you know, I think I told the story the other day of my mom who's in North Dakota saying that the Schwan man told her,
I'm sorry, the who?
he's not sure he's going to have food. There's this company, there's the Schwan company, SCHWANN, and they do home grocery delivery. They've done it for decades. The Schwan man is like legendary in my childhood because the Schwan man always meant ice cream bars. But these days, the Schwan man is also bringing like, you know, meat and produce. And but the Schwan man said, listen, like wholesalers are raising prices. I'm not sure I'm going to have food for you next week or how much it's going to cost. I mean, it really is real. And we should not, there's urban rural, and we should really not discount the racial component of the disease itself and the damage that it's causing. And then, of course, all of the structural inequities that mean that African Americans and Native populations in America are going to be more vulnerable to this disease and the economic disruption. And I'm just going to point out that there was a really great thread on Twitter about how that has to be taken into account when you report on the protests too, and how the protesters have been received by media as these sort of like liberating heroes compared to Occupy Wall Street protesters, as one example. And that's a part of this conversation that we also should not leave out.
Many parts of this conversation for sure.
So many cracks are showing up. One of the other big stories this week was Shake Shack returning this $10 million small business loan that they obtained after it came out that this money, and in fact, this was previously my news fix before I changed it, which was that CNBC put out a list of the largest public companies that took payroll loans, in many cases because of exemptions that were put in for large restaurant groups. So like the first one I heard about was Ruth's Chris. And then Shake Shack, of course, gave back the $10 million because they were able to raise like $100 million something from banks, which is a benefit that big companies often have. Listener Mike Garrison wrote in with the perspective of this really important question. Just because you can get the money doesn't mean that you should. He says, Mike Garrison, I'm the president of a small mid-sized company with 42 employees that sells cleaning and material handling tools. We are lucky. A large portion of our products go to food processing, which is reasonably stable. We're about as prepared as we can be. I've talked to decision makers at other companies as well as bankers about PPP, and literally all of them view applying for PPP as the strategically sound move to make, regardless of need. For some, it is actually needed, but for the rest, it's, quote, free money. My CFO's neighbor looked at her like she had three heads when she shared that we were not applying for PPP. We chose to make this decision based largely on need more than opportunity. We considered the fact that by not applying, we're leaving money on the table for businesses that actually need it. As you've said many times already, this crisis will be a turning point for our economy and our society. I hope that one of the outcomes is a step, even if it's a small one, towards something that looks a little more like ethical capitalism. I have to believe that we as a society have the ability to see that a decision for the greater good can be made within a capitalist system, because we all know that capitalism itself doesn't care if you live or die, so the people have to. What a great line.
Yes, it's a totally
have to.
great line. I despair just a tad because what this really involves, right, is wrenching money and power from the hands of those who have it and giving it to those who don't in this economy. And that is a challenge even in the best of times. And certainly I think there will be some reexamination of capital, but whether the people who have the power are going to step up and say, you know what? We have too much power and we have too much money. I mean, point me to where in history that has happened, and then we can have a chat. Oh, come on. Come on. Historical realism does not get me the dark place sting. What in the bleep was that?
Well,
Man.
to be honest, I think it's because historical realism takes it even darker. Because when it's happened, pitchforks and torches.
All right. Well, that's a
So
different podcast.
there's that.
That's a whole
Also, we should point out that the people with the money and the power are the ones who wrote the rules that allow the people with the money and the power to apply for these loans in the first place,
Yes.
whether or not they need them. So,
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Make me
Before
smart question
we
on the
go,
way out.
yes.
Last week's question, which was amazing, and you should check it out. I'm sure we've got
Amazing.
clips somewhere in our social feeds. Was incredible. Anyway, it made Molly cry, which is not in and of itself an unusual thing. Hello.
Nope. Must be Tuesday.
Here we go on the Make Me Smart question for today.
Hey, this is Molly calling in from Oakland. Something that I once thought I knew, but I just found out I was wrong about, is that I thought all eggs were naturally not white. I thought eggs were bleached. And I confidently declared this to a friend at dinner that I was all excited because I got a blue egg in my package of farm fresh eggs, but that white ones were always bleached before they were sent to stores. And then my son looked it up on the internet, and it turns out it is a common misconception. Eggs naturally occur white as well. Now I know.
Well, Molly in Oakland, thanks so much for writing in. We really appreciate it.
Molly in Oakland, you blow my mind. I can't believe that.
Oh, man.
I had no idea.
Oh, my goodness.
That is, thank you guys.
Oh,
Thanks
my
for sparing
goodness.
me and my dignity this 1 week.
That's good. It's all good.
Although
It's all good.
I think I am grateful to our producers and to the people who keep writing us with the real stories of what's happening in their lives. I mean, it really, this is such a, this story has this time that we are living through has everything. Everybody is affected in every possible way. And like, I really am grateful that we have the opportunity to talk about it and chew it over and make informed and uninformed opinions and get smarter and also hear the real stories. Also, before I go, Ida Bay Wells, I want to give credit.
Yeah.
Ida Bay Wells from New York Times Magazine is the one who was tweeting about the importance of taking race into account when you look at these organized protests and how they're received.
Yep.
Credit.
Fair
Also, a great follow on Twitter.
Totally. Yes.
Yep. Okay, that's it, right? Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Make Me Smart has a weekly newsletter every Friday morning in your inbox, marketplace.org/newsletters. Those Alexa explainers. There are so many ways to keep up with us and just keep hearing, just keep hearing more.
Just keep
And if
hearing
you don't
all
want
this
to,
stuff. We
it's
should
totally okay if you just go watch Picard. It's fine. Take a break.
make it so. Super quick, real-time slackage here from Tony Wagner. Ida Bay
Slackage?
Wells is the Twitter handle. It's Nicole Hannah-Jones is actually her name, right? Or it's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not
Yeah,
actually her
totally.
handle, but it's,
Actually, N. Hannah Jones is the Twitter handle. Ida Bay
Yes.
Wells is the
right. It's
Twitter
the-
name.
whatever
You're
it is.
right. Everybody gets me with their
Yes.
change their name to this and that. At least I didn't say stop or start testing now, which everybody has in their Twitter handles.
Oh, I know. Stay
Okay.
home. I know, right? You're like, cut it out.
Yeah. Make Me Smart is produced and directed by Sam Anderson, our digital producer and on-the-fly fact-checker, Tony Wagner. Our senior producer is Jody Becker. Thanks to our video producer, Ben Heathcote, and our video intern, Ethan Peretz. Thanks to writer-producer, Erica Phillips.
Today's program was engineered by Drew Jostad. Our theme music was composed by Ben Talladay and Daniel Ramirez. The executive director of On Demand is Sitar Nieves. The senior vice president and general manager, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut this for time. Well, the music stopped. I thought that was our out cue.
You're just baiting her. You're just baiting her.
Oh, I kind of was, yeah.
This is just bait. It's just a fat, juicy earthworm on a hook is what that is right there.
Oh, man. Well,
She's
look, come
out
on.
like,
I baited her
beep,
last
boop,
time and she
beep,
showed up. I baited her last time and she showed up on Friday. You know, who knows what she'll
Exactly.
do
That's what
now.
you're going for. She's like,
Oh,
oh, what
my
do you want to
God.
know Wednesday? I still work here.
All right.
Pew, pew.
Senior vice president and general manager is Deborah Clark. Fine.